Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the launch event for Revolutionise. My name's Alan Clayton, and I've been fortunate enough, lucky enough, to have been a creative professional for almost 30 years. And I'd love to share with you today a very simple insight, which I have discovered gives tremendous power to the ability of groups of people to think creatively, to have ideas, to solve precise problems. But it's also the insight that's led me and my colleagues to create the methodology that Revolutionise is based on. So my big insight started about 15 years ago. My job was to work with teams of people, to have ideas, to solve problems, and then to try and get people to do them. And the three frustrations, sort of grinding frustrations and occasionally banging your head against the brick wall kind of frustrations, were getting people to do creative thinking really well. That was number one, with so many people settling for pretty poor quality creative thinking. Second was getting groups of people either in a creative exercise or beyond it to buy in, to agree with excellent solutions or ideas that were developed. And third, by far the biggest frustration, was then getting people to take action, to actually do the idea, to solve the problem and crack on at pace. And these were sort of, it was taken for granted that these would be constant frustrations of people working in the creative. But I didn't want to just settle for a career full of frustration. So I started to do what we do, which is gather data, in this case, behavioral data, and start to look at what are the particular behaviors that create this procrastination, this lack of buy-in, this inaction, or even this relatively low quality creative thinking. And I was able to identify four distinct behaviors. The first one is the most understandable. I call this one Miss Whatabout. And this is the person, the detail-orientated person who can't resist working out in detail how to execute an idea or a solution while we're still trying to have the idea of the solution. And the problem with this behavior is it can derail creative thinking, because whenever an idea comes up, they come in and say, what about this? What about that? How do we do this? How do we do that? And it kills the creative process dead. The second person is epitomized in my mind by a very particular person who I shall never name. And I call him Mr. Concern. And he used to insist on being present at every creative session that this business undertook. But the only contribution he ever made was to sort of take his glasses off like this and say, my concern is, and he would always pick the moment of sort of maximum enthusiasm of everybody else as the ideas were starting to flow. And that was all he ever said, was my concern with this idea is such and such. And he just wants to look clever. But again, it would derail and kill the creative process. In terms of getting buy-in or action, there's a particular behavior I can identify, which I call OPIUM. It's an acronym. It's an acronym for other people's ideas upset me. And this is a real passive-aggressive behavior, which there's a certain kind of person that never mind how good an idea is, they're going to derail it or block it or object to it just because it's not their idea. And the fourth behavior is one I call the carcass of consensus. This is compromising idea to try and get it agreed and signed off by everybody in the room and everybody beyond. And it makes the assumption that the most popular idea is the best one, whereas actually the most popular idea tends to be the most average one, which means it's almost certainly not the best one. So I dived into real detail on these four behaviors and tried to think, what are they all about? In the biggest picture, it boils down to creative thinking not being taken as seriously as many other ways of thinking, planning, structural thinking, or analytical thinking. And that's seen as being really serious, whereas by many groups of people, they thought that the undertaking a creative exercise was just about sitting around having a bit of a chat and a bit of a discussion. And these four really frustrating behaviors, the insight that allowed the breakthrough was these behaviors are completely illogical. A good, robust creative process will create the best solution to a problem you possibly can anytime. So these four toxic behaviors for anyone trying to be creative, they're all emotions, but they're kind of dressed up as being sane and sensible and logical. The detail-orientated person, very, very important to executing ideas, but they're all about the how, and he or she is worried about how they're going to do it before the idea is even agreed. It's an emotional worry about how am I going to do this. Mr. My Concern, his big fear is about commitment. It makes his life easy to never make decisions, to never get stuff going, and it's also a bit of a control behavior. OPIUM, other people's ideas upset me. Quite frankly, that's just about ego, and the leader of the creative process just needs to kill it off. And the carcass of consensus, that mistaking the most popular idea for the best idea, is all about fear of conflict. And again, it's a leadership issue to deal with that. So my big insight is it does not matter how good or indeed how perfect an idea or solution actually is. It can be perfect solution to the problem at hand, but if it does not also focus the emotion of the organization, it just won't work. It will either get blocked, it will get chopped apart, or it will get compromised so that it's no longer the optimum solution. So what we need to do, those of us working in the creative profession, is we need to put as much effort into preparing and working in the emotional space as into the robust, scientific, analytical space. To do great creative thinking, you need to do both. You absolutely have to have precise analytical thinking so you know exactly what you're trying to achieve and how to do it. But equally, you need to infuse people, get them to buy into the idea, get them to commit to the idea, and ultimately get them to do it. There is no priority over the emotional space and the analytical space. You just have to be the best at both of them if you want to be a brilliant creative team. Do both. There is no priority. Okay, how do we do this? This is what we call the 4 Ps of great creative thinking. 4 elements that you need to prepare before you go into your creative session in order to solve the most urgent or most important problem, or to generate the best idea you can. The first one is the people, getting the right people in the room, the right mix of people as well, and make sure they're extremely well prepared. Clear heads and concentration and focus and being present are essential to great creative thinking. So making sure that they're doing nothing else at the time they're trying to work creatively, and also stuff their brains with information about the task at hand so that everything they need to think fast and well is absolutely top of mind. Second P is place. A place that does not allow for distraction of any kind. It needs to be comfortable so people are not fidgeting in their chairs. No distractions. It needs to allow for variety, perhaps even outside space, so that you can change the environment to stimulate the thinking between fast and exciting and cool and reflective. Again, something that's needed for great creative thinking. The food has got to be something they can't complain about. Same with the toilets. The tech needs to work without being noticed, and the facilities and service need to be excellent so they don't distract from the task at hand. The third P is psyche, the mood of the room. Some people will need to be inspired and fired up. Some people will need to be reassured. But working in the emotional space, of course, creates a certain amount of discomfort. Those 4 negative behaviors that I outlined earlier are ultimately all fear-based. So people need to be in the space where they can face up to those fears and get through them and be excited by the prospect of change rather than scared of it. And that takes some serious preparation to get people in the right mood before we start with our 4th P, which is process. The very best creative process cleverly interweave working in the emotional space with a robust, proven, validated analytical process. And they can do both simultaneously in sort of 2 intermingling spirals is how I like to envisage it. And it's a real profession to do that well. It takes effort. It might even take some cost in order to prepare to do great creative thinking. But of course, the difference in value between great creative thinking and bad creative thinking is pretty much beyond measure. So we'd worked this out and we'd put it to the test. And one of my favorite examples was very early on working with a business from Norway. And on the face of it, it was an unemotional business. It was a tech business selling database systems in Norway. And they were doing pretty well. And they were brilliant at what they do. The technical ability of this company was outstanding, but they were struggling to grow. So they decided to visit us in Scotland. It was a great week. To figure out what to focus on, what are the strategies, what are the behaviors that will allow them to drive growth. So we put a lot of effort into overcoming the sort of psychological block, which was the company were all technological people. They were techies. And the opening statement was actually, we're just geeks. We just want to do the technology. We don't really care much about the growth of the company, financial growth, profit, etc. And they couldn't get fired up by the growth of the company. It was motivation to grow, focus to grow, energy to grow that was the problem that the chief executive was trying to solve. So to cut a long story short, as we were trying to solve the behavioral problem, as we were looking at the stories, as we were looking at the precise things this organization does, and as we were looking at the financials, something quite remarkable popped out. Amongst other things they do, they process income for good causes. That's one of the things that they do. And the insight was seemingly just a financial statistic, was that in the previous year, they had banked 364 million kroner in that year for good causes. That became simpler because with a small rounding error, that's 1 million a day. Now, this really got the attention of everybody in the room. They had no idea that their geekery, their technical excellence, their coding was actually running a process that was responsible for generating 1 million a day for good causes. Therefore, the target for the organization popped out in about 2 seconds. Just double it. Just double 1 million a day processed for good causes, and then we will double by default because everything we do is lined up by that. If our clients are achieving double what they're currently doing, then we indeed will. It was a customer-focused ambition. People across the room and then across the organization welled up with pride. One techie who had previously been the person who said, we're just geeks, he put it to the test and reported back to his chief executives a few days ago that his friends, his girlfriend, his colleagues at his gym had been gobsmacked when for the first time he told them both what he did at work, bank 1 million a day for good causes, and what they were going to do, which was bank 2 million a day for good causes. No surprise, a single goal, a single idea, an aligned team. Fear went away, energy came in, focus came in, they grew massively and really, really fast. And they achieved that 2 million in a little over a year. You can see the journey clearly. in this chart. If it can work for tech companies, ladies and gentlemen, it works for everybody. You will see this mix between emotional excellence and precise thinking come through in the stories and the insights from all the rest of our speakers today. And of course, please visit our website, revolutionise.com, if you're interested in learning how to do this by attending one of our great creative thinking masterclasses. I think the next one available is June. James will confirm, but I believe that May is actually sold out at the moment. But attend the masterclass or not, let's start off by appreciating that emotion is just as important in creativity as brilliant analytical thinking. Thanks very much. And James, back over to you.